Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to session number 14 of FileMaker Group Therapy for Citizen Developers. My name is Tim Jones, and our topic for this session is WebDirect. On the agenda for today, we're going to discuss what is WebDirect. We're going to look at the FileMaker Server settings that apply to WebDirect. We'll demonstrate how to share a database over WebDirect. We'll also talk about what does not work in WebDirect as compared to in the FileMaker Pro client. And I'll make some recommendations, best practices, tips, and tricks. So to get started, what is WebDirect? WebDirect is a service provided by FileMaker Server that enables authorized users to access your FileMaker databases through a web browser. This opens up your database app to users who do not have FileMaker Pro or Go client software on their computer or mobile device. Think, for example, people who use Android tablets for which there is no FileMaker Go. Now, you don't get any design or administrative capabilities when you're using a database through WebDirect. It just provides access to the data, but with a very rich feature set. You might wonder which browsers work. Most modern browsers, except for Firefox, including Safari, Chrome, Microsoft Edge. Note that Microsoft's old browser, Internet Explorer 11, support for that ended with FileMaker 19, and everybody has to upgrade to Microsoft Edge if they're going to use a Microsoft browser with WebDirect. It's also worth noting that browsers must have cookies and JavaScript enabled and have pop-up windows not blocked in order for WebDirect to be able to perform its magic successfully. You might also wonder, is WebDirect secure? Yes, it allows web access, but not anonymous access. Users log into your databases in WebDirect in a web browser, just like they do in FileMaker Pro and Go. In fact, the users will have the same permissions that they have, they'll have the same permissions when they're using the database via WebDirect as they would when connecting via FileMaker Pro or FileMaker Go under the same login account. How many users does it support? A maximum of 500. But if you have more than 100 or expect more than 100 people to connect to your database using WebDirect, you're going to need to move to a multiple machine FileMaker Server deployment. That is, your FileMaker Server installation will have to have more than one machine to support those additional users. In fact, it works on a 100-to-1 ratio where each additional worker computer installed in your FileMaker Server configuration can serve a maximum of 100 FileMaker WebDirect clients. All right, let's talk a little bit about WebDirect and FileMaker Server. There are a couple of settings here that come into play. Here's a screenshot of the FileMaker Server admin console, and I'll take us in there in person here momentarily so we can see it a little bit more close up. But here we are in the configuration tab and in the general settings section of that configuration tab. And we can see that there is a section down here under startup settings where you would want to turn on automatically start the web publishing engine. That's one of the key components to making WebDirect work, is that web publishing engine, oftentimes abbreviated WPE. You'll also want to work with the connectors tab of your FileMaker Server admin console. And here you can see that there is a switch that you can use to simply turn on or off WebDirect. Okay, you want to make sure that that is enabled. In fact, let me go ahead and demonstrate all of that right now. In this browser window, I am pointed to my server admin console page. I haven't logged in yet. You can see the URL for the server admin console is the IP address of the server, :16,000, and then admin console/signin. Or honestly, if you just put in this much and hit enter, it will take you to the sign in page. let me go ahead and log into my FileMaker Server admin console. This is running on a separate computer, a little Mac Mini up in the kitchen cupboard here in at Accelerate Computer Training. So it doesn't take an awfully robust computer to do it, although the more strength you have, the more horsepower you have in your server, the more users you can support, the bigger databases, the better response they'll get, the better throughput and performance. Okay. And so let's look first at the configuration tab, and we can see in the general settings here, in the startup settings, that I've got it set to automatically, first of all, to automatically start the database server when the computer launches or boots. Likewise, to automatically open all the databases that are in the database folders, that's enabled likewise. And then the important one here for WebDirect, to automatically start the web publishing engine as well. In the connectors tab, we want to make sure that this switch is set on, as it is right now, to enable WebDirect. Okay. And let me widen this a little bit, and you can see the URL that would be used by users who want to come in and access one or more of the databases that are hosted in WebDirect. And I'm going to go ahead and click that Open Launch Center link, which will open up another browser tab and take us right to that FileMaker WebDirect homepage. You can see it's the same IP address of my server, followed by FMI, which used to stand for FileMaker Incorporated. Now that FileMaker has changed their name to Claris, well, I guess they're stuck with the old abbreviation. And then WebD for WebDirect. That takes you to a dynamically built homepage, FileMaker WebDirect homepage, that lists for you any databases that you've got hosted on that instance of FileMaker Server that are enabled for WebDirect access. Okay. Notice that the animal care database that we're going to be working with here that we have been working with and will continue to work with in these webinars is not there at present, but it will be shortly. All right. Back into our slides. Let's take a look at sharing over WebDirect. How do we do this? Well, what we have to do is go into File, Manage Security, and we've got to enable the WebDirect extended privilege in one or more of our privilege sets. Okay, so here you can see a screenshot of the Manage Security window, and then a particular privilege set, right? And then in the extended, or sorry, not a particular privilege set, but in the extended privileges tab, I've double-clicked on the FM WebDirect extended privilege. That opens up this window, from which I can say, hey, I want to activate or enable WebDirect access to the full access privilege set. That's the one I'm in, to the admin privilege set, Anne is my admin, for example, and to the staff privilege set, Bob, Kat, and Don are all users in that privilege set. And so you can privilege set by privilege set determine whether WebDirect is going to be available to those users. How do they connect? Well, as I just showed you, but here's a little closer view of it. In a browser, they're going to go to HTTP or HTTPS:// and then either the host name of the server, accelerateComputertraining.com in my case, or the IP address, as you saw me doing from inside the firewall because it's faster and more reliable, /FMI/WebD. When they hit return after typing that URL, or you can provide them a link to it, obviously, then they'll be taken to that homepage like we just saw. All right, so let me demonstrate that as well. I'll go back into the browser, or excuse me, let me go back into FileMaker. And here's the animal care database that we've been working with in all of these sessions. Okay. First thing I'm going to do is go and enable that extended privilege for WebDirect access in one or more of the privilege sets. So we'll choose the security command. That'll bring up a list of users. I've added some users since the last time we met, Anne, Bob, Kat, and Don, in a couple of different privilege sets. Anne is my admin, Bob, Kat, and Don are all staff members. But it's not here in the user list where we can make this kind of change. Rather, we have to go into advanced settings. Advanced settings lets us get into the other three aspects of security. That is privilege sets, extended privileges, and file access. And while you can do what we're about to do in privilege sets one at a time, it's so much more efficient to do it here from the extended privileges. This list of extended privileges you can essentially think of as a list of connection methods. With very few exceptions, each one of these is a way that you can grant or deny people to access the database. Can they access it via WebDirect? Yes or no? Well, if you've enabled it for one or more privilege sets, then the people in those privilege sets will be allowed. Likewise, via ODBC or JDBC, via the FileMaker network. That's an important one. Obviously, that's how FileMaker Pro and Go users access your database, and so on with the data API and PHP, which I use on our website, and so forth. So I'm going to just double click on the FM WebDirect keyword or the WebDirect extended privilege. Double clicking on it will open up this window here. It lists for you all of your privilege sets, and you can say, all right, for this privilege set and that privilege set and that privilege set, I want to allow those folks to access this database via WebDirect. I'll say okay, and it lists them there. Okay again, and okay one last time. Now you can also use a command over here for configure for WebDirect, but it basically does the same thing. It allows you to do the same thing, I think just a little bit, maybe even less directly or intuitively, but that's just my opinion. Okay, now that I've got that database enabled for certain groups of people to access it via WebDirect, I'll have to upload it to my FileMaker server. So I'll close it. We'll say upload to host. I'll go and find it. Let's say local. I want to show there's my host. I'll have to log in again. You have to be an authenticated administrator of the server to be able to upload databases to it. All right, there we go. And I'll go and browse for or drag files in. I'll just drag that file in from Finder from the desktop. There it is, animal care. Oh, got a problem. Doesn't have the required password assigned to it. Okay, I'll deal with that. Back in FileMaker. And we'll open that file again. The error there was because I have an admin level password, or excuse me, an admin level account for which there's no password. And that's not acceptable if you're going to host the database in FileMaker Server. So let me go and give myself a password. Okay, there we go. And verify. Right. There we go. And I'm also going to double check my file options command and make sure that it's not set to log in using that account name and password. And it was, so that's definitely something you want to turn off before you upload the database to server. Okay, now we'll try that upload again. There's my server. And let's see if we can drag that file back in. There we go. Okay, so now it passed the scrutiny, and we'll upload that into server. There we go. And it gives us the option to open it in FileMaker Pro, which I will do, just so you can kind of compare the look between the WebDirect view of the database and the FileMaker Pro client view. All right, I'll log in as me. Uh-oh. Let's try that again. Oh, yes, of course. It was just my first name. There we are. So here I am in the database in FileMaker Pro in the client. But now, as I come over here to WebDirect and reload or refresh this page, we can see that Animal Care, now being hosted on the server and being enabled for WebDirect access, is available. All right, we'll say, I'll click on it, and it asks for an account name and password. I'm going to log in as, let's say, as Bob. Bob was one of the staff members, and I think he's got a blank password. Let's see. Yep, there we go. And honestly, you all could log into this database as well right now that you know a username and password of Bob and a blank password, by going to, I'm not suggesting that you do this, I'm just letting you know that that's how quick this is, how easy it is to publish your database for the outside world or those authorized users in the outside world. If you were to go to, in a browser, https://acceleratecomputertraining.com, which is the external public-facing domain name that this IP address is the equivalent of, acceleratecomputertraining.com/FMI/WebD, it would take you to that home page where you could see the database. Or if you wanted to go the extra mile and even just type in the name of the database, that would get you directly to it, and it would prompt you for your account name and password. And there we go. So take a look at how WebDirect is so faithful at reproducing the layout compared to FileMaker, right? It's remarkable technology. It's using HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, and just does a spectacular job of rendering our layouts as web pages. We can interact with data. Let me say I jump over into a different layout, like perhaps the animal form web layout. There it is. And likewise, I'll jump over there in the desktop version. Maybe we'll look at the same record. So there are the two side by side. Right? The layout, the design of the layouts isn't quite identical, but you can see how faithful it is. I don't have the nav bar here in the WebDirect layouts and so forth, but we could make changes. Who wrote hi, Tim? Somebody's. All right. One of you changed my dog name already. Oh my goodness. I knew I was asking for trouble when I did this. Let's change the dog name back to Hazel. There we go. And you saw how instantly it was. So this is live connection to the database. It doesn't even feel like a user is filling in a web form. There's no submit button. They literally just change the value, and let's put her full name, Hazelnut, change the value and click in a blank space like we're accustomed to in FileMaker. Watch, I'm going to click right now, 1, 2, 3, and it's done over there for all the other users. The data is submitted. Likewise, we could create new records. Let's say I go and add a new record here. There's this custom WebDirect toolbar that gives you all the essentials. Make a new record, and I've got a picture that I want to insert. It's over here on the desktop. Now for this, let's see. There it is. It's this dog picture. Let's see if it supports drag and drop into a container field. It sure does. So drag and drop into a container field right in WebDirect. And let's say that that is Red and he's a dog. And he belongs to the Buchanans. There we go. So WebDirect gives you a very nice looking rendition of your layouts, basic functionality. You can find, you can sort. Let me widen this a little bit more. There will be a sort button that appears right there. You can sort your records by any field that's on the current layout. Let's say I wanted to sort by name. And of course, any scripts that we have written and attached to buttons on these layouts, users can run. Okay. Now, one really important thing about giving access to your users via WebDirect is you need to make sure that they have an elegant way to exit out of the database. Because if they just close this browser tab or close the, all the browser tabs, it doesn't gracefully exit them out of the database. They would have to know to come here to this menu that's particular to WebDirect and say close the file. There, now they are out of the database, their session has been ended, and it no longer counts against the number of concurrent sessions that you, as the host of that database or the server, are paying for. You have to buy enough licenses when you purchase your FileMaker software and FileMaker Server. You have to buy enough licenses for the maximum number of concurrent users that might connect to your database at any one time. And WebDirect users, of course, count against that limit. So if you've purchased 5 licenses, but you've got a 6th person trying to come in, you want to make sure that everybody's getting out of the database when they really mean to. And closing the browser window does not end or terminate their session. This did, as I did it properly, and so we're in good shape. Okay, so that's how you give access to users to a database over WebDirect. Let's talk about next what does not work in WebDirect. And this is a kind of a pretty long list, so we'll go through it quickly. I've put the most important things first. There's no such thing as preview mode in WebDirect. So if your scripts and reporting logic requires a preview mode, you won't have it in WebDirect. There are many script steps that don't work in WebDirect. I'll show you how to figure those out in a moment here. What you can do is, well, first of all, you need to know that if WebDirect encounters a step in a script that you've written that's not compatible with it, that script step will be skipped, but the script continues to run, which that also may be disastrous. So you've really got to think through your scripting and make sure that you have not used any WebDirect incompatible script steps in your script. Here's how you figure out whether a script step is compatible with WebDirect or not. You can use this script compatibility menu to say, show me which script steps are compatible with FileMaker WebDirect. It's in the top right corner of the script workspace. I'll show it to you now. Switching over into FileMaker, and I'll get into the script workspace. Here we are. And let's say that I just get into one of these scripts and click the show compatibility menu, and I'll say show compatibility for WebDirect. And then I'll click this button here to show the script steps in the language. And let's see how many of them have turned gray. Those are all the ones that are not compatible with WebDirect. Okay, so far, no big deal. There's the preview mode that I talked about. Okay, what about editing records? So there's no such thing as perform find replace. That's different than perform find. That's find replace is this command here. Okay, maybe that's not a big deal. Right, insert from device, insert from index. In the records group, a few other script steps not available. No save records as Excel. That could be a killer. Nothing in found sets, that's fine. In Windows, this is another one that's going to come up here in my list of what doesn't work in WebDirect. Although you can make new windows, as I'll explain shortly, you only see one window at a time. There's no stacking of windows in WebDirect. So that's a concern perhaps. In the files group, most of the files commands are incompatible with WebDirect. WebDirect just doesn't have access to the file system. Okay, in accounts, we're all good. Spelling, nothing, and so forth. Obviously, they can't get into these menus because they're not in FileMaker. All right, so that's probably the biggest concern, is those script steps that are not compatible in WebDirect, and the fact that they are simply skipped and the script continues to run. The script does not abort or fail. It just keeps right on trucking along. Next, multiple windows are not supported in WebDirect. Instead, only one virtual window displays in the browser window at a time. So while you might have a script that opens up a new window, the WebDirect user will only see one window. But FileMaker WebDirect keeps track of the fact that there are multiple windows open. They're just called virtual windows, and only one of them can be visible and active at a time. So that means that you'll have to use script steps if you're going to open a window in a WebDirect context. You'll likewise have to use the close window script step to close it to get back to the window that was open beneath it, so to speak. Okay. Other things that don't work in WebDirect, there's no such thing as table view in WebDirect. Users can't click objects that are stacked beneath other layout objects. So stacking objects on top of each other, especially clickable objects like tab labels or buttons, is problematic. Just make sure that you don't put anything on top of a tab label. Don't put anything on top of a button. You can use calculated tab labels. You can use icons that are built into the buttons. There's a healthy collection of icons available for your buttons that hopefully will allow you to not have to create stacks to do things that you might have had to do differently in the past. In our last webinar, we talked about custom menus. Well, custom menus are on the hit list here. They don't work in WebDirect. There's also limited text formatting in WebDirect, like no highlighting, no tab stops. Users cannot enter data with rich text formatting, meaning bold and italic and font size. There's also no autocomplete or type ahead in fields in a WebDirect context. Okay. Mobile browsers. So again, think maybe somebody who uses an Android tablet and uses the browser on that Android tablet because there's no FileMaker Go under Android. I'll say yet, but I'm not sure if there ever will be. Mobile browsers do not support these things. So again, this is not somebody who's on a desktop computer, but if they're on a mobile device, a phone or a tablet, and they're using the browser on that phone or tablet, not using FileMaker Go because it's not an Apple phone or tablet, these things will not work. They cannot import records, export the contents of container fields, insert files into containers by dragging. Neither can they save snapshot links. So that all pertains to only mobile browsers. That is a web browser used on a mobile device. Another thing that doesn't work in WebDirect is having container data that's linked by reference. If you've inserted a file into a container field and said store only a reference to the file, that file is not going to play well in WebDirect. And lastly, you can't insert large files into container fields via WebDirect. You have a 300 megabyte limit on the size of a file that you can insert into a container field. If you need to insert a file larger than that, you'll have to get onto a desktop device to do that and use FileMaker Pro or Go. Now here's kind of a quirky one. You know how a web browser has a refresh button or a reload button. In fact, I used it earlier to refresh or reload the WebDirect homepage. Well, let's say that a user is using your database in WebDirect and they think, oh, I'm frozen up or something's not responsive, and they hit the refresh or the reload button in their browser. That does some weird things. What it does is WebDirect leaves the current session without signing out. So the session is still open, still active. It's still counting against your number of concurrent connections, your concurrent connection limit. And it doesn't activate the on window close or the on last window close script trigger. So you don't get a chance to kind of clean things up if you're accustomed to doing that with one of those final housekeeping kinds of scripts. Likewise, WebDirect then creates a new connection to the database, because remember, they click the reload or refresh button. So it then establishes a new connection to the database, which means now there are probably two sessions from the same user into the same database. And if you have a limited number of concurrent connections, yikes, now you got somebody using up 2 of them because they hit the reload or refresh button. Not good. You need to train your users not to do that, okay? And if they do that, it does activate the on first window open and on window open script triggers as it normally would in other publishing contexts. So those are some quirks that happen when you're in a WebDirect context if a user uses that refresh reload button. Here are my recommendations for getting good results out of WebDirect. First of all, use a detect and direct strategy when somebody connects to your database. We want to run a script that runs automatically when the database first opens to detect how the user connected, and then we'll direct that user to a layout that's designed for their device or platform. Now, we did that in session number 5 of this webinar series. We learned how to write such a script. And let me just show you that again as a quick review. Here's our onOpen script. This onOpen script performs 3 other scripts, 3 subscripts. The second one is detect device. The detect device script sets a variable called $device that performs a function that we wrote called detect device. And so now, of course, I'll show you that function. There's our detect device function. And it says, hey, let's look at the results of the get application version function. And that's going to return a string of characters that if it contains the word pro, then that means they connected via FileMaker Pro. If it contains the word web, it means they connected via some web publishing method, either WebDirect, more likely than any, or could be PHP custom web publishing or XML custom web publishing. You'll know whether you've made those publishing methods available. If it says or contains iPad, that means they connected from an iPad, and Go, it means they connected from an iPhone. And so then the detect device function that we wrote simply says, all right, if it was Pro, then put the word desktop in that variable. Use the word web if they connected via the web, iPad, and iPhone respectively. And as a default, I just said, well, let's assume iPad because it's kind of a middle-sized screen. And so by so doing, then running that function, now we've got the word desktop or the word web or the word iPhone or iPad in this global variable. And then our navigation scheme, of course, will factor in that global variable to determine what layout to take them to right in there. Go to layout, such and such table, view, and appropriate for the kind of device that they're in. Next session, in the next webinar, we're going to dive into the navigation strategy that I use in systems that I build for my clients. And we'll take this and really take it well beyond into the next level, make it so that it's automated and easily customizable and data driven. All right, so we definitely want to direct our users to layouts that are appropriate for their device or platform. Next, also help your WebDirect users exit gracefully. When I was demonstrating WebDirect a moment ago, I showed you that closing the browser tab does not exit them out of the session of their connection to that database. It just kind of like crashes them through the door. We want to help them exit gracefully. So make sure that you give them an easy way to close out of the database without just closing the browser window, because that does not end their session. Instead, put a button on every layout that performs the exit application script step. Put that button where they can see it easily, and they'll use that to gracefully exit out, or at the very least, teach them how to use that little button menu in the top left-hand corner of the WebDirect interface. Other recommendations to improve performance on your WebDirect layouts. Try to keep your image sizes appropriate for web use. 72 pixels per inch resolution would be ideal. Choose or create simple layout design themes. Reduce the use of object states on your layout objects, things like on hover and so forth. Minimize the use of conditional formatting on your layouts. Also, minimize the use of portals, tab panels, and slide panels. calculation and summary fields, fields with validation options, fields with data formatting options, and script triggers. So all of that, minimize the use of those to improve the performance overall. Lastly, list views, which take up a lot of, which perform a lot of transactions to the server. All right, all of those will help you with your performance on WebDirect layouts. So that's what I had to share with you today. Are there any questions that you have about sharing your databases over WebDirect? Kathy M has raised her hand. Yes, Kathy. You're muted, so I can't hear you.
I'm so sorry. I noticed that the close file command is a script step that is not supported in WebDirect. So exit application is what you would use then for the button, right? To get them out of there without closing the browser.
Yes, use the exit application script step. Let me show you where that is just in case. Let's say I come in down here and type EXI. There's exit application. And if we jump into showing WebDirect compatibility, we can see that it stays just fine. It would have turned gray if it were incompatible with WebDirect. Or likewise, I can show it to you over here. I just have to remember where it is. There it is. It's in the miscellaneous category, exit application.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Use that on your iPhone and iPad layouts as well. That's the safest way to let people close out of the session of their database.
Great.
Thanks for that, Kathy. Good question. Any others?